It was supposed to be a small change, one of those simple improvements that no one in their right mind would find objectionable. After all, it was just a mailbox. But I should have known better, living in a community governed by a homeowners association, especially one run by Karen Whitmore, meant that even the smallest act of independence could ignite a full-blown war. All I did was move my ranch mailbox 3 feet closer to the entrance gate. The old post had rotted from the bottom, and rather than replace it in the same difficult-to-access location where snowplows routinely buried it in winter, I figured a more convenient and protected spot made practical sense. It did to everyone else except Karen. The new location wasn't even outside regulation distance. It still sat comfortably on my property, nowhere near the HOA's boundary line. But as I pounded the new post into the earth, I heard the unmistakable sound of Karen's hybrid SUV crunching gravel behind me. I didn't even turn around before hearing her sharp, nasally voice that mailbox is in violation of HOA standards. I turned, hammer in hand, sweat on my brow, and raised an eyebrow. "It's on my property, Karen." That was all I said. I didn't yell. I didn't explain further. But those 5 words were enough to spark the fuse. By that evening, Karen had filed an incident report with the HOA board claiming I was threatening community harmony. She then called the sheriff's office alleging trespassing and property modification without proper approval. I watched from my porch as the cruiser pulled up, a confused deputy knocking on my door, paperwork in hand. "You're being accused of unauthorized construction," he said awkwardly, clearly realizing how absurd the situation was. I handed him my deed, pointed out the boundary line markers, offered him lemonade, while he confirmed that I hadn't broken a single law. Karen stood across the road the whole time, arms folded, lips pursed like she had tasted a lemon soaked in vinegar. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next week, Karen launched an out campaign. First came the mailer's half sheet. Flyers stuffed into every resident's mailbox warning of property devaluation risks due to non-compliant structures. Then, the email blasts, where she framed my simple move as a precedent that could lead to unregulated construction and visual pollution. It would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. My mailbox, a rustic cedar post with a hand-painted box, was apparently the first horseman of the HOA apocalypse. Then came the straw that broke the legal back. Karen marched onto my property one morning, completely bypassing the gate and tried to measure the mailbox herself. I caught her mid-trespass, tape measure extended, camera phone recording. "You're on private property," I said, stepping between her and the box. "You have no right to be here." She recoiled like I'd struck her, pointed dramatically, and screamed, "Assault! I'm calling the cops." She did. Again. This time 2 deputies arrived, but one of them recognized me from a previous community event. After reviewing the footage from my security cameras, which showed Karen trespassing and initiating the confrontation, they warned her. But they didn't arrest her. Not yet. That's when I decided enough was enough. If she wanted to play legal games, I had a full deck. I contacted Mitchell, my family lawyer, who'd helped me beat the HOA once before when they tried to fine me for keeping horses on agricultural zoned land. He reviewed everything, the deed, the footage, the HOA's own bylaws. His conclusion was clear. Karen was overstepping, and more importantly, she had crossed into actionable territory by repeatedly trespassing and launching defamatory claims. We filed a cease and desist letter first. Karen laughed and ignored it, going as far as writing in the HOA newsletter that some residents were lawyering up to hide their guilt. That was the final straw. Mitchell filed suit in county court. Defamation, harassment, and violation of property boundaries. The summons was delivered to her while she was in the middle of planting flowers in the community garden. Really, the community took sides quickly. Some longtime Karen loyalists started backpedaling when they realized her obsession with control had gone too far. Others dug in deeper, showing up to HOA meetings wearing shirts that said "Preserve our neighborhood." But the majority, they just wanted peace and understood that a man adjusting his mailbox shouldn't have to battle for his rights. In court, Karen's behavior was put under a microscope. The judge reviewed the footage of her trespass, listened to the 911 calls. She read through the email blasts and shook her head in disbelief. Mitchell laid out a clean, chronological case that proved I had acted within my rights every step of the way. While Karen had escalated without cause, the judge dismissed her countersuit on the spot and scheduled a hearing for damages. During cross-examination, Karen tried to cry on the stand, claiming emotional distress and that she feared for her safety. But my legal team played the footage of her yelling across the fence line, footage of her measuring on my land, and her public HOA newsletters filled with baseless accusations. The judge's patience wore thin. "This isn't a matter of safety," she said. "This is a matter of ego and overreach." Ultimately, the court ordered Karen to pay damages $15,000 for defamation and emotional duress. She was also slapped, with a restraining order preventing her from coming within 200 feet of my property. The HOA board, under pressure from the community and legal threats, held an emergency election. Karen was voted out. By the end of the week, a new president had been elected, Ron Delgado, a local vet, and one of the calmest, most reasonable people I'd ever met. I replaced my mailbox with a new one-of-steel model with a cedar sleeve engraved, with the words "Peace through truth." A bit dramatic, maybe, but it felt right. Life on the ranch slowly returned to normal. The mail carrier left me a note: "Love the new spot, no more awkward stops in the snow." Karen, meanwhile, faded into obscurity. Rumor had it she put her house up for sale quietly and moved to another HOA's neighborhood. I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I remembered the cold mornings standing in court, the paperwork, the stress, and I felt nothing but relief. But even with Karen gone, the fallout hadn't fully settled. The HOA board had to undergo serious reforms. At Ron's request, I participated in a review committee that updated the community guidelines to prevent overreach in the future. We put in new protocols. Residents needed a 2/3 vote for invasive community measures. All board communication had to be transparent and archived, and no HOA official was allowed on private property without written consent. It wasn't just about my mailbox anymore. It was about drawing a line in the sand for everyone. Meanwhile, Karen's lawsuit and its aftermath had made the local papers. One article titled "Mailbox Mayhem Ends in Courtroom Drama" highlighted the absurdity of it all, but also championed the importance of property rights and personal boundaries. I received messages from folks in other HOA communities, thanking me for standing up when they felt powerless. Turns out, there are Karens in every corner of the country to celebrate the end of the ordeal. I hosted a small gathering at my ranch. Neighbors came by with pies and casseroles, laughing over the ridiculousness of everything that had happened. We grilled steaks by the fire pit, and one guy joked, "Next time you plant a flower bed, better ask the UN for permission." I laughed for the first time in a while. Without any bitterness, the mailbox still stands tall, untouched and undisturbed, a symbol of quiet resistance. Every morning when I walk past it to check the mail, I'm reminded that sometimes the battles we don't choose are the ones that show us who we really are. And while I never asked for this fight, I wouldn't undo a single moment, because now I know peace isn't something given, something earned, and sometimes defended. Even after the courtroom gavel came down and Karen was effectively removed from the Haas helm, I knew that peace was a fragile thing, especially in communities still recovering from the scars left by leadership like hers. The lawsuit might have ended, but the atmosphere around the neighborhood was still thick with lingering tension. Some neighbors were skittish, others overly enthusiastic to prove they were now on my side, and a few clearly missed the old regime. Ron Delgado, the newly elected HOA president, was determined to steer the ship differently. He was methodical, deliberate, and patient. Everything Karen wasn't, and he brought me on as a consultant to help overhaul the association's protocols. The first few weeks were filled with meetings, not the angry, passive-aggressive shouting, matches of the past, but actual constructive discussions. We rewrote half the handbook. We abolished obscure clauses that had allowed petty fines. We created a public project request portal where residents could submit proposals and get responses within a week. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest. More importantly, it was accountable. During that same time, I noticed something strange. A white SUV with tinted windows parked outside my property line several times a week. It wasn't Karen's model, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I installed more cameras and took the license plate to Mitchell, who discovered the vehicle was registered to Karen's sister, a real estate agent from 2 towns over. It seemed Karen couldn't let go. Then came the notice, folded into my mailbox. Like some cruel joke, was an envelope with no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper typed, unsigned. Legalese listed that my property was under review by a private neighborhood zoning consultant and that there may be a request to reevaluate existing fence and utility lines. Glance, it looked like junk mail. But Mitchell assured me this was a warning shot. Someone was still trying to stir things up. Ron took it seriously, brought it before the board, and we conducted a quiet investigation. Turns out, Karen had tried to appeal her ouster under a little-known HOA clause allowing past presidents to request an independent review. The clause was removed by a unanimous vote. Meanwhile, I decided to protect my ranch from any more surprise visits. I had the boundary markers repainted, added new signage that warned against trespassing with explicit citations from the updated HOA charter, and hired a local firm to install smart sensors that triggered alerts when anyone lingered near the gates. But the real story began one afternoon in early fall.
Ow.
The leaves had just started to turn, and I was repairing the fence near the creek when I heard voices on the wind. Children laughing? That wasn't unusual. My ranch bordered a public trail, but the sound was coming from deeper within my private lot. I followed it and found a group of teens using my pasture as a shortcut. They said they'd been told it was. Open land now cleared for public access, as per the HOA's new Nature Path initiative. My eyebrows furrowed. I hadn't heard of any such project. That night, dug through the HOA meeting logs and found it. A proposal submitted and approved 2 months ago while I was traveling out of state, suggesting an easement through undeveloped parcels along the eastern perimeter. One of the parcels listed was mine. Only it had been marked on the HOA's digital maps as non-owned public greenbelt. Someone had doctored the records. Mitchell was livid. This wasn't just overreach, it was fraud. With Ron's help, we traced the digital submission back to a now-deleted board member account. And after a little technical forensics, we found the IP address matched one belonging to Karen's niece's home network. The web of manipulation was wider than we thought. This time, we skipped the cease and desist. Mitchell filed a civil fraud case and pushed for criminal charges. Ron and I called an emergency town hall to set the record straight. I showed satellite maps, deed records, and the entire timeline. The crowd gasped audibly when I displayed the doctored parcel overlay. Karen, who had been noticeably absent from community events, showed up mid-meeting. She tried to speak, but the crowd erupted. People shouted her down. One elderly resident stood up and yelled, "We trusted you. You tried to steal from him, from all of us." After the meeting, the board voted unanimously to permanently ban Karen and her relatives from participating in any HOA leadership or initiatives. A motion was passed to issue a formal apology to me, and the county sheriff launched an investigation. The legal proceedings dragged on for months, but we won again. The court found Karen and her associates guilty of attempted land fraud, trespassing by proxy, and tampering with official community records. She was ordered to pay restitution, fined by the county, and forced to sign a restraining order that now included digital communications and proxy involvement. Ironically, during that time, my mailbox, the origin of this entire saga, became something of a local landmark. People would take photos with it. A local reporter even did a feel-good piece about it, calling it the mailbox that stood its ground. By winter, the ranch was quieter, peaceful. Ron asked me to take over as the community liaison for rural properties, and I accepted. I wasn't just a rancher anymore. I was a symbol of boundary, of standing firm when others try to push you off. Your own land. The mailbox still stands in its spot, under a small lantern that flickers on at dusk. It isn't just a box for letters anymore. It's a monument to resilience. Proof that when you own something, your land, your name, your truth, you don't back down for anyone. Not even a Karen with a clipboard and a chip on her shoulder. And as the snow started to fall that December, I leaned against my fence post, sipping hot coffee, watching the flakes land softly on the cedar wood of the mailbox. For the first time in a long time, I felt something simple and pure: home. But the aftershocks weren't entirely over. That winter, a local developer who had quietly backed Karen's influence in the HOA reached out to me through his assistant. He wanted to mend fences and proposed a buyout of my eastern acreage, citing plans for a community wellness center. I turned him down flat. A week later, one of my barn cameras picked up a man in a hard hat surveying near the back fence. I sent the footage to the sheriff, who confirmed the man was contracted by the same developer. A cease and desist was issued, and my lawyer filed an injunction. The attempt to leverage my property for HOA-supported development projects exposed a broader scheme. Karen had long been planning to commercialize sections of the valley with the help of certain board members and this developer. Our court case had unraveled part of that plan, but now we realized it ran deeper. Ron and I worked with county regulators and found multiple irregularities in prior HOA permits, including misfiled environmental reports and bogus signatures. So we took it to the county zoning board, testified publicly, presenting a full audit, trail of communications, and illegal permits. Ron presented the HOA's reformed bylaws and our reform efforts. The county responded by revoking several permits and initiating their own investigation into the developer. The fallout was swift. Several former board members were fined. The developer's company was blacklisted for future projects in our county. A task force was formed to review other HOA communities for similar corruption. And for the first time in years, our neighborhood felt like it truly belonged to its residents. Not too shadowy influence or self-serving power plays. I built a small gazebo near the mailbox that spring. A quiet place to sit and watch the road. Kids sometimes bike past and wave. Neighbors stop to chat. Sometimes they bring newcomers to show them where it all started. It's surreal, really. But every time I look at that mailbox, I smile, not out of pride, but because I know it represents something far bigger than itself: the power of standing firm, the value of truth, and the lasting peace earned through unshakable resolve.